We're so excited that you all are here. My name is David Morales. I'm part of Project Llano, the project on youth and non-military opportunities, one of the hosting organizations of this event, along with Veterans for Peace, the Homegrown Youth Collaborative, Secret City Project by Evan Apodaca, and the Palestinian Youth Movement. Again, we're super excited that you all are here. We are looking forward to engaging you all in the screening of these two short films that we have tonight, as well as other activities and very important conversations. As violence in Palestine continues, death and destruction continues, despite announcements of ceasefire, as the deployments of US troops to the border and their enlistment in mass deportation gets announced, as fires burn, and as we see and face the eco-collapse of our natural world, we think that this conversation, us interrogating and combating militarism here in San Diego in one of the most militarized geographies, is so important and as timely as ever. This event that we are presenting tonight, that we're hosting tonight, is part of Enero Zapatista, the 21st annual Enero Zapatista in San Diego. Yeah. For 21 years, individuals, organizations, collectives here in Kumeyaay territory, San Diego, have been honoring, commemorating the uprising of the Zapatista movement on January 1st, 1994. On that date, the Zapatistas, who are an indigenous-led movement, Mayan descendant people of different ethnicities, Tzetzal, Tojolabal, Tzotzil, Soque, Chol, descended from the mountains down to the cities and took back their land, essentially, after 500 years of colonization. They said, ya basta, enough is enough. And particularly during the 80s and the 90s, when neoliberal policies were coming into effect, when the rich were celebrating the coming into effect of these policies and celebrating the new year, celebrating these policies that only made them even richer, that allowed them to exploit the land, to steal the land from indigenous peoples, the Zapatistas again rose up in arms and said, no more, ya basta. These policies are a death sentence. And for over 30 years, this movement has taught us so much about what it means to resist, has taught us so much about life, about resisting colonization, resisting militarism in their own geography. So here in San Diego and with you all, we hope to engage you again in these conversations as military technologies continue to be devised, invented, and exported from here, from San Diego, as students, young people continue to be recruited in their schools through programs like JROTC, through the presence of military recruiters. We are very much looking forward to exposing some of these campaigns, talking about some of these campaigns, and thinking about ways to continue to resist and combat militarism. So we, again, are really thankful that you all are here. I just want to say really briefly that we have bathrooms through this door. We hope that you continue to help yourself to the food in the back. Now I'm going to pass it over to my compañeras here, Ash and Winter from Homegrown Youth Collaborative, who are going to lead us in an activity before we get ready to start watching some of these films. Thank you all so much.
Hey everyone. Hi. Thanks, David, for the introduction. I'm really grateful to be here with everybody celebrating this year's Enero Zapatista over some good food and, with political education and through watching these films together. So yeah, I'm Winter, and this is Ash, and we're two members of Homegrown Youth Collaborative, or Homegrown for short. As David kind of mentioned, we're a community education project based here in the Southern California and Baja California borderlands, where we do cross-border and intergenerational learning and popular education programming. So a lot of our past work has been either youth-led or co-created directly with young people, where we design and facilitate political education projects and workshops just like this one, centered on challenging the ways we are taught to learn or even just think of learning. And also how we can untangle ourselves from the carceral and colonial logic of the foundations of our education system through study and building our political consciousness like we're doing today. So yeah, we're also very grateful to be co-organizing this event with organizers whose work are also rooted here in one of the most militarized cities in the heart of empire, a place I'm sure most of you who are joining today are very have a complicated relationship to. Not only just San Diego, but that word militarized. What does that even mean? And the U.S. military itself. So if you're anything like me and some of the friends and family that I see in the crowd, we're born here and made a place out of this stolen land, possibly by participating in the U.S. military or being a result of American presence abroad. And so militarization is kind of this loaded word, that we all have baggage with. And so with that, before we watch these really amazing films, we're going to start with a super quick brainstorming activity to kind of help us think through what militarization means, but also like the various players that make the militarization of our borderlands, and how we as individuals, young people, people in different neighborhoods, people who bear the heaviest burden of militarization or, benefit the most from it, how all of us fit into this complicated web of like war and violence. So yeah, Ash is gonna reorient us to this giant weird board that you've seen, and help us move through this like super quick activity.
Yeah, thank you so much, Winter and David. Also, just know that people are already getting settled, but we do have a good amount of chairs up front if anyone wants to move forward so you can see the activity, but hopefully it's big enough that no matter where you are, you can see it. But yeah, thanks so much, both of you, for the introductions. I similarly am grateful to be here. I was just wanting to orient y'all to this big white board that Winter's writing on right now. We're going to be using this as part of this first activity. So this piece of paper, you should see the word militarism written on it in the center. And we are going to ask two sets of questions. We'll ask people to raise their hands to share those thoughts and responses. And while people do share those thoughts, Winter's going to be simultaneously adding those to the butcher paper and making kind of drawing connections and yeah, like connecting dots and drawing connections. So does anyone have any questions before we get started with that activity? Well, it'll make more sense as we like get into it. Okay, cool. So the first question that we have is who are the key players in the military industry in San Diego? This could be people or institutions. Yeah, anyone have kind of initial thoughts? And again, this is just to kind of get us started. We'll learn a lot more about all of this through the screenings and through the conversations later, but if anyone wants to share some of their initial thoughts, we welcome. Military bases. Anyone else? Yeah, go for it. Sorry, UCSD School of Global Policy. Any other thoughts? Weapons manufacturers. Anyone else? ROTC. Yeah. Border Patrol. Anyone else have reflections? Yeah. Government contractors. Any other thoughts? Yeah. Taxpayers. Yeah. Municipal government. Yes. Air shows and what'd you say? War games. Air shows and war games. I saw another hand.
Former military personnel.
Former military personnel. Yeah, thanks everybody. Any other, yeah. Police. Police. Yes. The Port of San Diego. Okay, cool. This is, yeah, we'll take one more. Tech companies. Cool. This is a great list already, and there's so many more. But we'll kind of start with these and go to the next question. So our next question is, who else is affected by militarism or connected to it in some way? Families, you yourself. Where do you fit in? Where are you connected? This could be anything from really obvious connections, right? Like that your family, a family member of yours, or you yourself have served, or you are currently serving. You went to or you are in high school in Centro SD, and you have JROTC or Junior Reserve Officers Training Corps classes promoted at your school that you can take as an elective. You grew up in the North County middle class or upper class suburbs, and you definitely did not see JROTC classes at your school, and you were funneled into elite universities like UCSD and studied in the Jacobs School of Engineering. Or you have a parent who's an engineer who works for a defense company in Kearny Mesa. Or you grew up in Barrio Logan and your dad worked at the NASCO shipyards. Or you grew up in Tijuana, but you crossed the border every day to go to school, and you experienced the militarization of the border. The list goes on, right? So I'm curious, like, if anyone wants to share some of their own experiences. That could also be like not only people in your personal experience, but also like neighborhoods, and also like who benefits from the San Diego work economy and who bears the heaviest burdens. Anyone have thoughts? Anyone have some of those similar examples I shared that you want to add to the map? It's personal. It can be personal, but it also doesn't have to be. Yeah, go for it. Yeah, so San Diego marine life. And Winter's putting these in a different color and then going to make kind of real-time connections to some of these kind of like answers to the first questions that we had. Anyone else have reflections on the second question, which is who else is affected by militarism or connected to it in some way? Oh, yeah, go for it. Divided Kumeyaay territory. Yes.
I think we have to also look at the local companies that are not directly employed by the military or military, but barbershops, restaurants, all the different businesses who rely on having a large military population here to survive. So they bought into it because it's part of the culture here.
Yeah, thank you. What would we... The war economy, or just like even local businesses? Yeah. Okay, cool. Any other reflections? Yeah, go for it.
Sure. What comes to mind for me is a nurse I know who used to work for the VA and had such a miserable experience and witnessed so much in their patients that it, just demoralized them from the practice of nursing.
Mm-hmm.
And, that's to say nothing of the patients themselves.
So to synthesize your
veterans
the veterans
affairs, veterans
themselves.
health.
Anyone else have thoughts? Yeah. Sex workers in National City. Yeah, thank you. Unhoused folks who've been unhoused because of military housing. Any other thoughts? Yeah. 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 Anyone who's over surveilled by the state, black and brown folks. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, and we'll take like maybe 2 more before we move on so we can start these films. But yeah, this is a great introduction to the activity. So lower income communities and those that are looking to go to college but can't otherwise. Cool, yeah, we'll do this last one. So just the housing prices and being so high, as they're like also connected to military housing, is that what you're saying? Cool. That are connected to military bases. Yeah, thank you. Cool, well thanks y'all. Okay, we'll take one more and then we will start the films, but we thought this would be, well, of course we could, like this map, yeah, it could just continue to grow. We thought this would at least just like get us all in the headspace so we can start thinking about this as we move into the film screenings. But yeah, one last one.
Sorry, yes, this conversation already has been really inspiring. I think about school administration and principals who are tasked to make budgeting decisions based on what electives get offered at our schools. Dwindling offerings that really funnel students into programs like JROTC.
Yeah, so school administrators, yeah. Cool. Thanks, everybody. Really grateful to start to just like think more about how we all fit into this. I don't know if you have any reflections as you see the map, but we will return to this and continue this conversation after the film screenings. Anything else? Cool. Well, thanks everybody. I'm gonna pass it over to Evan to introduce the 2 films that we'll be screening tonight. Thanks, Evan.
Hello, everybody. I'm Evan. I'm about to introduce the films that we're going to watch. There are 2, which document the anti-war movement in San Diego over the course of, one of the films was from 1971. It's called Connie Stay Home. So this is 54 years ago. It documents the campaign which was intended to stop an aircraft carrier from leaving the Bay of San Diego on its way to Vietnam. And so Connie refers to the USS Constellation. And then the other film is Yo Soy El Army, and it takes a critical look at military recruitment, which targets Latino youth in our public schools here in low-income communities. And what's interesting about these two films is that there are people that are here present today with us who were not only present during the Constellation campaign, but have also stuck around in San Diego and have had a part in the counter-recruitment movement, which I would say the Soy El Army represents, right? So, and I think presenting these films is important because it documents to some extent like the evolution of our city, the evolution of resistance to militarism, and we can think about them as documents to see, okay, what's next? How do we have to evolve our tactics, our strategies, and even what failures have happened, you know? And another thing that's interesting about these films is, in the case of Connie Stay Home, you know, we have folks from Palestinian youth movement here today who have launched a Mask Off Maersk campaign. Maersk is a logistics company which is complicit in shipping weapons to the state of Israel, right, for their genocide. And so this is related to, you know, many other campaigns which, you know, in the past there's been a Stop Our Ship movement, the USS Constellation, the Connie movement, and in that film it represents an era where aircraft carriers were like a target, and so and we can think about what does militarism look like now? What do military strategies look like? It maybe not so much boots on the ground, and we can look at how has this evolved today? How has recruitment changed from, you know, the draft to voluntary enlistment, from you're going into the military forcefully versus, you know, PR campaigns and JROTC. So these might be documents of the past, but they very much represent where we are today. So let's get started. There are two films. Each of them are about 30 minutes apiece, so it'll be a total of an hour. And then after that, we're going to do sort of like an open Q&A and leading into the second activity, which is sort of like a part two of this mind mapping activity. So thank you all for coming. Let's get started.
So we looked around and we saw the aircraft carrier, which is the biggest ship in San Diego Harbor. It's the most impressive symbol of American power. And we said, look, we've got to get the myths about that carrier out into the open and show people that they are just myths. And we got to tell them what it really is. We got to say what that ship really does, and not to defend freedom or to protect the American way of life or whatever people claim that ship is being used for. It's hard for people to realize this, but that ship is not a naval ship anymore. It's really part of the air power that we use to attack peasants and people who live in poor countries, people who don't have any defense, so to speak, don't have a military force that can defend themselves against this kind of weapon. It's the weapon of a bully. It's a weapon of aggression. And I know Americans don't like this word, but it's the weapons of imperialism. Weapon is anti-personnel weapon is the fuel-air explosive bomb, and it's a little bomb that scatters canisters of little aerosol bombs over an area and starts spraying vaporized fuel. And a certain point that all ignites, and what happens is that everything in that area is incinerated, and then there's a shock blast that's as strong as the blast from a 500-pound bomb. And if anybody survives that, then they're going to suffocate. I mean, the people who can survive that will probably suffocate because that explosion will just suck all the oxygen out of them. Now, these weapons are not designed to sink ships. They're not designed to attack other enemy airplanes. They're designed to kill people. This isn't war anymore. What we're talking about is terrorism. When a powerful country, a small group of men can come into a place and just do whatever they want. And I think the American people have to say something about that, ought to have the right to say no to that.
And again, members?
We're supposed to make decisions that directly affect our lives. That ship affects many, many lives, and we're voting about it.
Smile, you're on Peace Intelligence Network. Morning, Chief. All right. Good morning. Would you like to see what's happening, Enero?
Take your time. I know what's happening.
Oh, wow. Some of us don't. See, that ship costs over $2 million a day to sail. And this town just,
No, I can disagree.
Well, can you document that?
I can disagree. I'm the budget director for it.
How much does an aircraft attack carrier task force cost a day to sail, to fight, when it's expending armature?
Well, okay. You brought up another subject now.
What? expending armament?
Yeah.
Well, that's what it does. Right? So that's what it costs.
But
Somebody pays for all of that armament.
my only question is, why do you people have to look so weird, like this one here? Can't you just look normal like everybody else?
Don't I look normal? See, I don't judge you by the way you look, and I'm happy to talk with you as a human being. And I think the way we look is more or less irrelevant.
It's not irrelevant.
See, I used to be a lieutenant in the Navy, USN, and I've flown. No, I'm not kidding you. In fact, I can prove it to you.
I'm retired Master Sergeant in the Air Force.
Yeah, yeah, that's what these wings are about.
Yeah, but why upside down?
Next stop is Vietnam, and it's 5, 6, 7, open up the pearly gates. Well, there ain't no time to wonder why we're all going down.
I don't really believe that they want peace. I think they want to be a monarch, be a ruler of all the people. I don't really believe in that. I believe in freedom. I like my freedom. Oh, I don't know. I don't particularly agree with it. I don't like going over there. But like I said, I'd just as soon stop it over there and stop it over here. If I got over here, we may not be able to stop it. I have family over here, and I just don't want them exposed to it.
I can't do anything about it, you know. So I just have to go along.
Are you going to vote in the election? Are you going to vote?
Well, you don't have to be 21 to vote on that.
No.
Yeah, I guess so.
Hell, you gotta go. You ought to be able to vote at least.
So if they want to end the war, they should stop dropping the bombs over there.
And do you think it'd be a good thing to try to stop the war?
Yeah, if they quit bombing. They're pulling troops out, why not pull the bombs out?
Just tell them the war's fucked up. No way getting around it.
How's the feeling on the ship? What do most of the people feel?
Oh, lifers, they dig it, but everybody else gets uptight.
The people who dig it, what do they feel about the people who are trying to get a vote on whether it should return or not?
Well, I think it's, what can you say? Anti-military and all this, which it is, as far as I'm concerned. I can dig it, though.
What are you, some yelly coward? Go on, aren't you a man? Kill her, she's a communist! Kill her! Kill her! What are you, a bunch of cowards? This is war! What are you, a coward?
I'm not responsible. I just pay my taxes.
I just work in the shipyard.
I just load the bombs.
I just fly the plane.
I just pull the lever.
Which kills me.
You get a chance to get back to the farm with this one. Don't care about
Don't be afraid, I love you on the run. And anyway, I'm not here just for fun. I'm here because
I came back to this city because, first of all, I used to walk the streets. You know, I used to walk up Broadway. I used to take the boat from the Kitty Hawk and spend some lonely nights walking up and down that city. I came back to this city because I've made probably 15 trips to the zoo, you know, because there was nothing else to do. And the main reason I came back was because I didn't want to see anybody else go back to Vietnam. Now, I was on a Kitty Hawk in 1966 when it was ready to be deployed again to Vietnam. We were bombing Hanoi and Hai Phong, and I just returned from one cruise. And after really searching my conscience quite a bit, I just came to the conclusion that I couldn't go with that ship. I don't want to go into a long story about what I did, but I went on a hunger strike, and I was court-martialed, and I spent some time in the brig, and I spent some time in the Naval Hospital. I lost a lot of weight, but I finally got out of the Navy. You go in the service, I think there's certain things that you know you're going to be denied. You're going to be denied some basic freedoms. You're not going to be able to move around as free as you did when you were a civilian. But I think there's some things that you don't expect to be denied, and that's your integrity, and your consciousness, and your humanity. And when I found that the Navy asked me to give those up, I looked back at the Navy and said, I can't do that.
I don't know about wipe
I don't
up.
think it's important who
I've
wins.
been there,
Who can win? What is winning?
and there's not going to be any wiping up. There's got to be a deliberation on what's going to be done.
And Nixon
People have to
says
decide.
peace, but yet they're sending that aircraft carrier to Vietnam.
We've still got a lot of people in Vietnam that they're not there by choice. They're there now.
Sometimes it's not good to express your thoughts, right? In my capacity.
Do you feel that the Constellation should be going back to Vietnam? Or do you for peace?
No, I don't think it should. I don't think that.
And you're an ex-Navy man?
Yeah, I'm an ex-Navy man.
Then why do you think it should not go back to Vietnam?
Well, I don't know. They haven't made any progress now in the last 10 years, so I don't see what the heck they're going back there.
It's weeks and weeks.
Do you think that
Steel.
the Constellation should go back to support the war in Vietnam?
I wish we was clear out of there, sir. I don't know how to answer that question. I wish we was clear out of there. Yes, I do. We've had too much involvement. We tried to pull the other fellows' chestnuts out of the fire, France, you know, and it looks like we're getting more involved every day. But I can't understand the head of the government here, why they're parley-foxing around, why they just don't get the boys out of there, you know, have it over with.
How about the war?
If it could be helpful in ending the Vietnam project or war, whatever you want to call it, I'd be for it.
You're against the war then?
I'd like to see it end. I think we've been there long enough.
Do you think Nixon is ending the war now?
It seems to me he's trying to, although it's built up to such momentum that it's doubtful to me that it can be stopped in a hurry. Of course, I wish it could be, you know.
Do you think it should be stopped by us winning it? By sending out the Constellation to bomb Vietnam?
I am not in favor of bombing anything, you know. I think we had enough of that at Hiroshima.
So then...
You been in the service?
You're goddamn right I have. And gammon, I know what I'm doing on there. And these fellows in Congress and in the Pentagon and those that run that service, what them knows us not to have a bunch of kids come around and tell them, don't you do that. I'm going to hit you right in the mush. Y'all hit you right in the mush.
Okay. Now listen, one
And I don't mean maybe.
Do you think the Constellation should go back to Vietnam?
Shut up. Shut up. I said so.
Then you're in favor of the war in
Get
Vietnam.
that thing out of my face, will you?
Are you in favor of the war in Vietnam now?
The what?
The war in Vietnam?
Doesn't make any difference whether I am or not. But none that know about it are. And by God, or what goes on. Now, men that don't know a goddamn thing. You're hardly born.
I admit that. I agree.
Oh, you're hardly born.
The last duty I did aboard ship was aboard the Valley Forge. And I was rather surprised, and I'll tell you frankly shocked. She cost $190 million.
And you think that's too much to spend?
Good heavens, yes. On a piece of iron junk like that?
We understand the Constellation costs $2 million a day to run in a battle zone.
$2 million.
A day. A day?
That rather boggles the imagination, doesn't it?
No, I would think that it's been proven, we've been there long enough, that we cannot achieve a military victory as such. The longer we stay there, I'm sure that the South Vietnamese people would resent our being there. So I feel it would probably should pull out.
So you don't hope that the war ends?
Well, I hope it ends pretty soon. Because it's getting pretty rough. And I believe it ends soon and everybody come home. And if it doesn't, there's gonna be plenty more people that's gonna be killed. I hope it ends soon.
Are you gonna vote in the Constellation election?
I don't know. I can't say.
Hello, I'm Chuck Humphrey, stationed on board the USS Chicago. The Constellation vote concerns everybody in this city. I'm going to vote yes on the Constellation staying home. Let's do it one more time. Hello, I'm Chuck Humphrey, stationed on board the USS Chicago. The Constellation vote concerns everybody in this city. I'm going to vote the Constellation to stay home. The Constellation vote concerns everybody in this city. I'm going to vote for the Constellation to stay home.
I was stationed on board the USS Constellation. I would urge all San Diegans to consider the brutal realities of the air war in Indochina and then vote to keep the Constellation home for peace.
I'm stationed aboard the guided missile destroyer Parsons. I'm going to vote yes to keep the Constellation at home, and I urge others in the city to do likewise.
Former naval lieutenant and naval aviator, I'm going to vote yes in the Constellation vote for the Constellation to stay home.
I'm going to vote for the Constellation to stay home. This war has been going on for 10 years, and we've never been asked what we think. This is our opportunity for our voices to be heard.
Hi, everybody. Thank you very much for being there. And the word tonight is dialogue. And if you have teenagers, that's something you've had to learn recently.
That's all there are left is 100 military. Listen, don't take all those military. I need some of them. You should probably have a quarter of them, and I should have 3/4 because I've got 3 beach areas. Yeah? Better give me 200 Roxanne. Yeah.
Would you like to vote in the Constellation vote this morning? Vote in the Constellation vote? I already did. Oh, okay. Would you like to vote in the Constellation vote this morning?
Well, I shouldn't go back to bed, no. I'm trying to keep them going this time.
How about voting? Maybe it'll help. Maybe we get the war, then nobody will go. That's good.
Stay.
Okay. Constellation vote. And you're a military dependent?
Yeah.
Stay.
Stay? Stay.
Back today.
Let it go.
If you'd like the Constellation to stay home, vote yes. If you want it to leave, vote no.
I want it to stay home.
That's yes.
I know.
And then check active duty member of the military in San Diego area if you'd like to vote.
They need it, send it.
I mean, all's been done is the most simple of con jobs about the war. I mean, that ship's going to sail out with 6 million pounds of armaments on it, and it's going to drop over 100 million pounds before it ever comes home. Now, that's a war that's going on. And it may not be a war in Washington, D.C., but it's sure a war in San Diego Harbor, and it's even more sure a war in Vietnam.
And we found that so many other people feel the war is a dead issue, that it's over. This is a unique situation, not only because it's happening in San Diego, but because, here again, someone feels the war is not over.
What made you decide to get involved in this straw vote movement? What do you hope to accomplish by having the straw vote? Realistically speaking, do you think this straw vote will have any influence on the Navy's plans for the sailing of the Constellation? What kind of results have you been getting here today? I notice many people go by you and don't sign anything. What about that?
Ship cannon, I don't care. Do you think Constellation staying here will help freedom?
It sure would. Throughout the entire world.
Now, the states say we cut people's fingers off. I've seen people's feet cut off by the comb. I said,
You
whoop
want to
'em.
axe that one? That's the
Boom 'em, give 'em hell. Who do you think is furnishing the goddamn Vietnamese?
Doesn't mean anything.
All right.
Right. Right?
I'm a patriotic United States citizen, and I'm a patriotic man.
Getting everyone ready because we're going to stop after these cars pass.
And the question occurred to me, if, in fact, these men, these old men, these women, these children represent, quote, the enemy, and they're out to kill our boys. And if we are, in effect, then fighting men, women, and children who are trying to kill us,
Can I really say anything?
we're fighting on the right side.
Well,
because assumably we're there to gain freedom for these same men, women, and children. And to say that you have to follow orders, you're on the ship, you follow orders. My God, you just are Court-Martial Lieutenant Kelly. You don't just follow orders.
Okay, sir. Thank you very much for the call. Okay, we'll go to another line in 1 minute.
To bring out a popular vote of protest against the return of an American aircraft carrier to Indochina. A report from ABC's Dick Shoemaker.
The U.S. Constellation is a fighting carrier. From these decks are planes that bombed North Vietnam. But now it's the ship that's under attack by war protesters who don't want her to go back to Southeast Asia. Their weapons in this war are unusual. A light plane that flies over the city with a banner asking people to vote and back to sea. There are also hundreds of T-shirts, thousands of bumper stickers, and of course the balloting. For the last 4 days, young people have been stopping civilians and sailors on the street, asking them to vote on whether the carrier should go back to war. So far, the protesters claim to have collected over 20,000 ballots, most of the votes apparently against the ship. The campaign reportedly is costing $50,000. Much of the money raised in concerts by singer Joan Baez.
From San Diego to Maine.
The leader of the campaign is the singer's husband, who recently served 20 months in prison for draft evasion.
An aircraft carrier can maim, an aircraft carrier can kill people, an aircraft carrier can destroy villages, an aircraft carrier can wage war very well. But an aircraft carrier can't give us peace, and can't give us justice, and can't give us freedom, and can't give us democracy. And if those are the things we want, then we have to find tools to get them with. An aircraft carrier isn't one of those tools. All
Initially, I was against just primarily against the war in Vietnam, you know. I said, well, this war here is right wrong. This is right here, and I got to think about it. I said, why should the common man go around dying and spilling his blood, having his life ruined for some man sitting in Wall Street or Moscow or someplace and doing it? I said, no, we ain't going to do it. It's time, you know, it's time mankind said no.
It's so plain, you know, it just blows your mind every time you land on that loading 500-pound bombs, you know. When the chaplain comes over at night and blesses you for doing it, you know, this bullshit. And,
you know, we're America, you know, we're never wrong. My country, right or wrong, in the American dream, you know. I forgot what the American dream is all about.
This is part of the body count from Vietnam. It's true. She was listed as an enemy wounded when she was 11 months old.
Put the mic on there.
Oh, it's just a camera, sir. It's not going to hurt you. Not like a big gun.
Like a little gun.
Right.
I'd like to talk about.
But before I talk about that ship, I think there's some more fundamental things that we have to look at first. There's a set of words that we all use and we all want. They're words like peace and justice and democracy and freedom. All of us use those words day in and day out because those words are the things that all of us want to be. And instead of being peaceful and just and democratic and free, what we've become is the burners of children. Not because if you went around this country and stopped people and asked them, do you want to burn children, you would get a yes. No one would say yes to that. But because we live in a country that spends 70% of its tax dollars on weapons. We live in a society that's decided it gets to dictate the terms that other people live in. And we live in a society that makes profits, and war is good profits. And there's lots of oil and there's lots of minerals in Southeast Asia. And if you have to burn children in the way, it doesn't show up on the dividend sheet. And one of the tools that's transformed us is sitting in San Diego Harbor right now, and it's got a big number 64 on its side. And it's called an attack aircraft carrier. But an aircraft carrier can't give us peace, and can't give us justice, and can't give us freedom, and can't give us democracy. And if those are the things we want, then we have to find tools to get them with. And an aircraft carrier isn't one of those tools. Just like you wouldn't try and sew a patch onto your pants with a wrench, you don't try and make peace with aircraft carriers, because they won't do the job. That for 10 years, the government has been waging a war. Now, in those 10 years, they've never bothered to ask any of the people who have to wage it, or any of the people who have to pay for it, or any of the people who have to suffer from it, whether or not they wanted that war. Now, I don't know about you, but after 10 years of waiting to be asked, I figure if you're going to get asked, you would have been asked by now. Which doesn't mean you're not supposed to tell. It means you have to tell. It means all of us have to take that word democracy that we use and take it seriously and say, hey, you know what? That big ship with the 64 on its side belongs to us. It doesn't belong to Richard Nixon and Melvin Laird. And understand, if you want the ship to sail, that when it sails as a death warrant for thousands of people in the world. And it doesn't sail as something that does something for us. It sails as something that destroys precisely those things that all of us need very badly. It destroys our peace, and it destroys our justice, and it destroys our liberation, it destroys our democracy, and it destroys our freedom. We need those things. We need them very badly because none of us are going to be able to survive in this world unless we get them. So we must go out to get them. And we can go out to get them by standing up and raising our voices. Because if you don't stand up and say it, you're never going to be heard.
prospects of reinstating the draft, even as President Bush makes plans to expand the overall size of the Army.
There's no end in sight to U.S. involvement in the Iraq War.
The military clearly is not big enough.
It is in our vital national interest to send an additional 30,000 U.S. troops to Afghanistan.
We are facing a crisis in terms of troop shortage.
You want to unify Republicans and Democrats, bring up the draft, because we're all opposed to reinstating the draft.
There's no draft, of course, but we have not fully mobilized the nation.
10 years of war in Afghanistan and 7 in Iraq have stretched America's all-volunteer army to its limit. With almost 1,000 permanent military bases around the globe, the U.S. needs to add another 92,000 troops to its 2.5 million member armed forces. The constant need for troops to maintain this massive global presence is causing a crisis in recruitment.
I do solemnly swear
to support and defend the Constitution of the United States
against all enemies, foreign and domestic.
So help me God.
In poor and working class communities across the U.S., military recruiters are working their way into schools, churches, and community groups. They are making the military a normal part of American life. A 2009 study by the U.S. Army-funded think tank RAND specifically pointed to Latinos as an untapped source of recruits. The study encourages the military to aggressively target the Latino community.
Going way back to the Clinton administration in the 90s, there was a recognition in the Pentagon that the largest military age group in the coming decades, really, was going to be Latino, just because of the way the population was growing. Demographically, we were going to have the largest pool of young people.
Jorge Mariscal is a Vietnam veteran and professor of Chicano Studies at the University of California in San Diego.
They also realized that our young people don't have all the educational and job opportunities that some other groups do. So that meant that we were a logical community to focus on. These things, in combination with the population growth, really meant that we had a target on our back as a community.
Latinos tend to do very well at basic training, not drop out of basic training so much as other groups. They tend to stay in the military longer.
Margaret Stuck is a lieutenant colonel in the U.S. Army, immigration law consultant for the Department of Defense, and a professor at West Point.
Many Latinos are comfortable with a more conservative or traditional lifestyle, I suppose you might say. They're able to handle a hierarchical military structure where people in charge will give orders and everybody else is expected to follow the orders. There are some communities that are less likely to be interested in that kind of lifestyle, but generally speaking, and again, this is generalization, Latinos adjust pretty well to that kind of lifestyle, and I think it's part of its cultural.
If you look at the Pentagon's own documents, they have 3 or 4 principal markets. And it's interesting that those markets aren't defined by ethnicity, but if you look at those markets, there are just a lot of Latinos there. So the San Antonio market is huge. The New York City area, New Jersey, again, heavy in Latinos is one of their main markets. The Miami market. The LA market is huge, which actually stretches all the way up into Central California to about San Jose. So if you look at the demographics there, Latinos are overrepresented.
Today we have a college career fair, and right now, just to make it a little more interesting, we bring our pull-up bar. Pretty much what we do here is we give out information about the Marines. We let them know what the qualifications are. We dispel any myths or clear up any rumors. All right.
At LA's Manual Arts High School College and Career Day, Navy and Marine recruiters are on hand presenting the military as an alternative to college or work in the private sector. The 2001 No Child Left Behind Act requires every high school in America to give the military access to its facilities and even student records for the purposes of recruiting.
Right now, I'm an electrical engineer. I work on $2 million worth of equipment. Along with that, I already got my college degree.
Today's military not only recruits students, but their teachers as well.
As an educational professional, your highest priority is guiding students to opportunities
that will result in successful futures. We would like you to consider that one of these opportunities might very well be the United States Marine Corps.
A lot of people and certain educators in school believe that, you know, if you go to the Marine Corps, you know, you're going there to be a killer or you're going to end up getting killed. And the Marine Corps is far from that.
Several times a year, educators from around the country gather to attend an educator's workshop at Marine Corps recruit depots.
The only thing out of your mouth will be yes sir, no sir, and aye aye sir. Do you understand?
Yes, sir! Hopefully, you know, I've helped a few students, you know, reach their dream.
1, 2, all the way down.
But increased militarization of American schools is not happening without a fight. Just a few miles away, anti-militarism activists are waging their own struggle.
It's about military recruiters. Thank you.
Arlene Inouye is a teacher in the Los Angeles Unified School District and the coordinator of Coalition for Alternative to Militarism in our schools.
It seems like a setup to me. I feel like there's a setup that we are really pushing certain kinds of kids into the military, and it always impacts upon those who are the poorest and those who are the darkest, who don't see the opportunities or don't have the opportunities, and those who are immigrants who feel that they want to belong and that this is a way that they can prove their patriotism.
Okay, you got it. You guys want to check it out? I'm trying to get the military out of the school.
Ron Goches is a community organizer and teacher at Santee High School in South Central Los Angeles and a member of the Association of Raza Educators.
There were Marines on campus who came in with the Humvee, you know, camouflage. It looked like a scene out of Iraq, but they were not in Iraq. They were at lunchtime in the middle of our campus, you know, passing out propaganda to our kids, you know, having a little pull-up bar and all that, the whole deal. So we're here to, in a way, to counter that with students here. They're going to be passing out flyers to give the other side of the coin, right? These kids are going to be cannon fodder. They're going to be sending these kids off to Iraq, up to Afghanistan, wherever else the government, you know, regardless of whether it's Democrat or Republican, they're all the same, imperialist governments. They're going to go and they're going to attack future countries, and who are going to be the first ones, the front lines? Like always, Operation Brown Shield. Young Raza or African students who are going to be thrown into the front lines to defend American capital while living in one of the poorest parts of America.
Well, the reason the Pentagon tries to invade the public school system is very simple, and it's in their literature. They say, get them while they're young. That's a direct quote. What does that mean? Well, they're not recruiting middle school people, but they're giving them the notion that this is something that you want to be. They're instilling this notion of militaristic culture, that the military is something that they should want to be part of.
The U.S. Marine Corps has the highest percentage of Latinos in the military. Their strategy is simple: using Latino recruiters in Latino areas.
Most of the kids that we usually have coming here are Hispanic, are Latinos, and I believe it's because of the area that we're in. You know, East LA and Highland Park, Echo Park, and stuff like that. So, and yeah, Hispanics mostly. This row right here will stay still. You understand that? Yes, sir! Open ranks! Mark! I'm originally from Mexico. I was born in Mexico City back in 1987, so I'm 23 years old now. What school do you go to, dog?
I went to Cal State LA, graduated from Roosevelt.
What? How old are you?
18.
Okay. What I do out here is just look for, you know, pretty much my replacement in the Marine Corps. That's how I look at it. Look for the best of the best out there in the high school, so that's what I do.
Hey, I'm busy right now.
At the Marines recruiting office in South Central Los Angeles, recruiters meet with a constant stream of prospective high school students with promises of a bright future.
Going into criminal justice is something you want to do. You got a pretty good score for it. So the closest we have to that, well, you can take different routes, and I'll talk to you about that when we sit down.
Okay. Better we do it tomorrow, like around 10.
Tomorrow 10? All right, I'll be here tomorrow at 10, bro.
All right.
Amen.
I'll see you tomorrow.
Good meeting.
Being part of the military is good for Latinos. It all depends what they're interested in. Mechanics, criminal justice, just like the young man that was here earlier. There's also jobs in engineering. Those are some of the career paths they can take. I never try to convince them. I always talk to them about the different opportunities, what's available to them, how they can help themselves through the Marine Corps. I paint a picture for them.
Han izado nuestra bandera y nuestras esperanzas. Por generaciones han asegurado que tengamos un país al que servir. Ellos son los Marines.
Recruiters will tell you, well, we don't target by ethnicity. But if you look at their programs and their various campaigns, it's clear that that's not true. They've worked with many corporations over the years to refine their message for Latinos.
The Department of Defense spends millions of dollars to fund studies of the so-called values of the Latino community.
You can go and look at the surveys the military has done of people serving in the military in all different ethnic groups and the things that they say attract them to the military. So Latinos have a very distinctive set of reasons that they cite compared to other groups for why they're joining the military. And I'll just give you one example. In the Latino community, people tend to listen to their parents a little bit more than they might in other communities. So if the parents approve of the military service, a Latino is more likely to join the military.
Estos son comentarios reales de padres con hijos en los Marines.
Se fue por unos 3 meses, lo extrañé un poco, pero a la larga me escribía y me decía que estaba bien y me sentía más tranquila.
Obviously, our campaign, our media campaign with the commercials help out a lot because we have a lot of young men and women that either call the office or walk into the office and say, you know what, I saw the billboard down the street.
These outreach strategies to the Latino community have produced results. Latinos are now the largest minority group in the military, and they are disproportionately placed in the most dangerous positions within the military ranks. Fernando Suarez de Solar moved his family from Mexico in 1997. He lost his son Jesus in the Iraq War in 2003.
Yeah, this is the flyer I put here in the store for the Picnic for Peace in my son's memory for the 7th anniversary. March 28, Friday, March 28, about the 8 o'clock in the morning, 3 military members from Camp Pendleton are ready home. What happened, my son? What happened? You come in my home, what happened? And got the one member, the military, and check and told me what happened, my son. Finality told me, Mr. Suarez, your son Jesus is a hero. He died last night in Iraq in combat. And living. No nothing, only living. Jesus' mother got against me and hit me and told me, you killed my son, you killed my son. You moved my family to this stupid country, you killed my son. I can't cry, I don't have a time for feeling my pain. I need the support, the whole family, the sister, the wife, the baby, the Jesus' mother. Bueno, pues liberemos a esta paloma como lo que estábamos diciendo, como el símbolo de la paz que representa. We try to make the peace in the war. Hola.
the U.S. military's campaign towards Latinos talks about educational opportunities and career advancements, but they seem to leave out the realities of war.
About 20% of the first killed in action Americans in the invasion of Iraq were Latinos. So we were overrepresented in that invasion, right? Because we're only about 15% of the population. We know, statistically, in the Pentagon's own studies, that Latinos are bunched in the lowest ranks and the lowest tech jobs in the military. Because of the social structures that we come out of, poor educational opportunities, poor job opportunities, that's where we wind up. We're not in the high-tech jobs. Some people will tell you, well, you know, it's still you're getting skills. Well, it's not clear what infantry skills are useful for in the civilian world, unless you're going to be law enforcement, where you probably need a college degree, or at least a high school degree, or robbing banks. So those jobs usually don't translate well into civilian life.
They have a TV
That. Yeah. Right here. It's a bazooka. What does it do? It's a hand cannon. Just hold it up to here. So your ignition switch right here. Safety clip. Hold. Shoot out.
We get to train with these during MCT, which is Marine Combat Training. You get to train more with weapons like these and like saws, machine guns, all that stuff.
Where are you from?
East Los Angeles, California. So I come from a diverse place where it's more Mexicans, but it's like, you know, gangland. There's shootings all the time, and just people die all the time where I'm from. That's how poverty is, you know, and you don't want to be around that stuff.
You know what is your job? Do you know yet?
Supply. Basically giving other Marines what they need to succeed in their jobs. I actually do want to see combat. I joined to fight for my country. I know it sounds kind of corny and stuff, but it is. I did join to fight for my country.
Patriotism, the need for opportunities, and for some, the promise of education. But these are not the only forces that are pushing young Latinos towards the armed services. A growing population of immigrants is creating a new and permanent pool for recruitment.
Calling it a defining moment, President Clinton, with great fanfare, signed legislation putting the North American Free Trade Agreement into law.
Illegal aliens are now competing directly with millions of U.S. citizens for jobs.
2007 may be remembered as the year the American people rejected amnesty for illegal aliens.
Bottom line is, we don't want amnesty. We would like you to stop the flow of illegals into our country.
The dream, really, of citizenship is the main thing that recruiters offer. Related to that is something called the DREAM Act. Now, the DREAM Act would actually take non-citizen youth who have been raised here, who brought here as children, are bilingual, bicultural, fluent in English, and graduated from high school. That would allow them to serve in the military and in exchange for temporary permanent residency.
One last point I want to make on the immigration issue, something that we can do immediately that I think is very important, is to pass the DREAM Act.
Please support the DREAM Act.
Please support the DREAM Act. Because we all deserve equal opportunities.
Because we all deserve an education.
What one has to realize about the DREAM Act is that the military option wasn't attached. The military option was there at the beginning. The Pentagon helped write the DREAM Act. Well, that's what people have to realize.
I introduced the DREAM Act several years ago to give them a chance to earn their way into legal status. If these young people will complete high school and then do it without any criminal record, go on to serve in the U.S. military for 2 years, or to finish 2 years of college, will give them a chance to reach legal status. I hate to see us lose these resources.
One of the strategic goals for the Department of Defense is passage of the DREAM Act. Everybody who qualifies for the DREAM Act will get a temporary green card. That will let them enlist in the military, but it won't let them become officers. Their road to citizenship is likely to be pretty long because of the way the act is drafted. They don't get citizenship right away. And they will only be eligible to enlist in some jobs, the jobs that are open to non-citizens. You can't join the military police because you have to be a United States citizen to be a military police officer, but you can join the infantry. That's a job that's open to non-citizens.
One of the important things too is that if they choose the military, they may fill some important needs. The Department of Defense has come out several times publicly supporting this legislation. They understand that we need more young people to volunteer for the military. If these young men and women want to find their path to citizenship by risking their lives and swearing an oath to serve the United States in our armed services, I believe they should have that chance.
I think that's important for people who are interested in military service to understand that, you know, the DREAM Act said after 2 years you can file a petition to lift the conditions, but that doesn't mean you get out of the military. Everybody who joins the Army today has an 8-year statutory obligation. You can lose your citizenship if you don't serve honorably for 5 years.
The danger of the DREAM Act is this, and we all support legalizing undocumented youth here who grew up here and have done nothing wrong here in terms of criminal activity. The danger is, as educational opportunities shut down, again, the military becomes the only viable option for getting permanent residency. So I'm afraid that we're going to see a lot of our youth driven into the military once the DREAM Act passes.
If they don't have the money to go to school or don't want to go to school, then the military offers an option for them.
If someone is desperate, can't find a job, can't pay for college, military options there. Promise of permanent residency is there. It's just too attractive.
Promises of citizenship and residency have always been an attractive incentive to join the military. But the reality of the lives of many immigrants who have served in the U.S. military tells another story. Rosalba Rebolledo and her father live in East Los Angeles. Her brother Fabian, a decorated veteran who served in Kosovo, was deported in February 2010 to Mexico.
Oh, well. Fabián es aquí. Está aquí. Aquí está Fabián. Si cuando un veterano, un soldado X cosa comete un error, pues es suficiente como para echarlo para afuera. En verdad, es una promesa falsa y tonta.
Across the border in Mexico, Fabian awaits a resolution to his status.
I went to the United States at the age of 14. I was feeling myself like, an American. So joined the military for 3 years, from 97 to 2000. And actually, my recruiter lied to me. He said once I joined the military, I was going to be a citizen of the United States automatically. So that's something that, I never forget.
Fabian was indicted for the crime of check fraud for a bounce check of $726 and was deported to Mexico.
I remember the words of the judge saying that, he said, "Thank you for serving this country. I'm proud of what you did, blah, blah, blah. But this will not stop me from removing you from this country. I already removed higher ranker than you are. What makes you think I want to give you the chance to stay in these states?" When you are under the uniform, they call you an American, they're proud of you. Once you're not on it, they forget about you. So they use you, they throw you away. That's how I feel.
Fabian is one of the estimated 4,000 veterans who are not citizens and who are being deported every day. Hector Varela and Hector Lopez are part of an organization called Banished Veterans. Both were deported and are currently living near Tijuana, Mexico.
On that side of the fence is the United States of America, the country that I served and defended.
Well, it's just really weird for me to be right here and knowing that the United States is right on the other side, and it's so close, but there's no way I can be over there, right now. I'm still a United States veteran, I'm still allowed a cemetery plot in a Veterans Administration cemetery and a headstone. When I die, that's the only way I can actually go back now, is if I die.
These folks, the 4,000 or so who are facing deportation, are trapped in that network now. The paradox of wanting more bodies for military manpower, but discarding those bodies once they're no longer useful. And if you have some infraction on your record and you could be deported, you will be deported. The only surefire way to get citizenship through military service is to die.
The history of the Latino community in America has seen significant moments of resistance to the pressures of assimilation and militarization. Today, however, there seems to be an opposite trend that is driving Latino youth to join the military.
That's a very strong move back to almost where we were in the 1940s, where people were, Mexican Americans wanted to make it, wanted to fit in, wanted to assimilate. And what's called neo-assimilationism is very strong right now. In World War II, we had 500,000 Mexican Americans serving in the armed forces, both in the Pacific and Europe. And in 1943, American servicemen were beating up Mexican American youth in Los Angeles. It's called the Zoot Suit riots. That's the irony. Our young people were being beat up while they were serving in the military. In Vietnam, we had thousands and thousands of Latinos from every country of origin serving in that war. And in 1970, August 29th, the LAPD and sheriffs killed 3 people, 3 Latinos, in a peaceful demonstration in East Los Angeles. In 2004, 5, and 6, we had thousands of Latinos serving in Iraq and Afghanistan, while ICE and the immigration officials were raiding our communities, grabbing people out of their homes and deporting them. So this is the weird balance that we live with, wanting to be first-class citizens, some of us serving in the military, and yet seeing others being treated as second and third class citizens.
The number of Latinos in the U.S. military increased by 25% between 2001 and 2005 alone. Today, Latino soldiers number more than 125,000. As the militarization of U.S. society continues to increase, the Latino community risks becoming a permanent underclass within America and its armed forces.
What I'm afraid, and a lot of other scholars are afraid about, is that as our population gets very large and the opportunities aren't there, that we become a kind of caste. That is, a kind of caste that's directed towards military service, towards the prisons, right, and towards low-paying jobs. The middle class that we've seen grow, precisely because people mobilized communities and took to the streets and demanded opportunity, simply aren't there right now. So it's not clear to me that even though we'll be a majority in the state of California, for example, within 20 years, that we'll have the opportunities. So you're looking at a caste system where our young people are sent to do the least attractive jobs in the society.
Check. Thank you, everybody. That concludes the films, and we are going to move on to our next activity. Thank you for watching and coming and convening and communing. Basically, we're going to start with sort of general reflections, take a few of those, and then we're going to transition into what we're calling a counter mapping activity, which is sort of part 2 of what is militarism. Part 2 is how can we counteract those locations, those forms of militarism. Let's start. Does anybody have just general reflections? Are people here who were a part of these, the topics that were represented in these films that can speak to, maybe provide context to what we saw and can maybe add more information, even if there are questions that you all have that maybe we can elaborate on. Feel free. Also, to be clear, we weren't conceptualizing like a Q&A, so to speak, which is kind of like what you see after a film presentation, right? But I would also like to iterate that this moment is kind of what we make of it, right? So I feel that it is super important to have these discussions in community so that we can hear each other talk, This is different than talking on social media. this is the moment that we have, right? So
raise your hand if you had a military recruiter go to your high school or school in general with the poll and everything. I was wondering. Thank you.
Did you have a question? Did you have a question as well? Or a comment? No? Okay. Please.
Hi. I'm just surprised because I'm still learning a lot, but I think actually, because I think we see stuff happen all the time and we're like, oh my God, that's so bad, oh my God, that's so bad. But when it actually happens to you and when you're in the situation and you realize that, it's like shocking, I don't know, and it's still happening, like in schools. Especially, and I went to Patrick Henry, horrible school, like it was horrible, and the experience was horrible, and they pushed ROTC so much.
Yeah, I thought there was an interesting point of synthesis between the two films. In the beginning of the Stay Home Connie film, the first speaker is saying, like, this isn't a Navy ship, it's used to fight peasants. And what we saw in the other film is that, and I'm not trying to like underestimate the imperial nature of the Vietnam War. Certainly that was a highly technologically advanced military decimating poor and rural communities. But what we see from the Soy El Army film is that, we're sending the poor and vulnerable communities of this country to go fight the poor and vulnerable communities of other countries. So it's all like poor people fighting poor people. That's what the military is. So I thought that was kind of an interesting synthesis that comes out of both films.
I want to just give you a context for why there was a focus on that aircraft carrier. At that time in the war, 1971, the people in Washington, including the Nixon administration, realized they really needed to bring troops back. There was open rebellion in some cases in Vietnam by members of the military. So their strategy was to shift from a ground war to an air war. And the carrier was a key component of that. They were going to continue to bomb and fight and kill people, but it would reduce the images of U.S. soldiers there suffering from that war. So that was the whole reason why the carrier was chosen here in San Diego. And you even heard David Harris was the man who was being interviewed, and he said it may not seem like a war in Washington, D.C., but it certainly is one here in San Diego and in Vietnam. And that's, again, it's because they wanted to change the war from a ground war to an air war.
If I could ask a question to the audience, how do you all see the forms of militarism that are represented in these films? How do you all see that present today? Like, what does that look like if those were to have transformed over time? What does that look like to you, the way you see it? In the case of aircraft carriers, for example,
Excuse me. I just wanted to ask, it's kind of connected to both of the things that both of you said about Marvel movies and then the spectacle of visiting, what's it called, the USS Midway, things like that. Anybody who works with elementary school students, I'm just thinking about how even at such a young age, they're already idealizing going into the military or military-like futures. And I'm wondering if anyone has advice on how to counter that in how you speak to elementary school students and like what you would say to a student that is like, I want to be a soldier when I grow up, or things like that.
Yeah, I actually have a direct response to that because I have two kids in elementary school, in Nestor and the South Bay. And I think one of the things, I have a 12-year-old and a 9-year-old. One of the things that we try to do, my partner and I, is to talk about the military in a context of power and how the military is a force that controls and destroys other people in other countries, but also locally how the military is used to brainwash people, right? So I think it's as you might imagine, with elementary school kids, it's not really necessarily just information, but they naturally they understand and they can feel what's fair and what's not, right? I think that's kind of what we saw. The same thing with Palestina, right? The same thing, like it's struggles that our peoples go through. So I would, and somebody that we're trying to do that, right? So yeah, that's a really cool point.
So I'm going to ask one last question, which is kind of a leading question into the next activity. And you can use this map as a guide. What are some locations that were targeted in the film that we can identify, as part of like a counter mapping practice or process?
The military and the resistance, as far as the outcome of the Connie Project, the ship sailed to Vietnam, but it was minus nine sailors. They took sanctuary in a church in San Diego. So they didn't go, the military and U.S. Marshals had to come and yank them, kidnap them out of the church after the ship sailed and took them to the ship. There was a headline in the newspaper, and the local newspaper said, "Sailors surrender and return to the ship and go back to Vietnam." They didn't surrender. They were kidnapped and taken there. And the resistance there within the people in the military, and we're talking about how recruiters are recruiting people to go in the military. There are people that, if all of you are aware, there's a requirement to register for the draft, even though there's no draft. There are so many people that are not registering for the draft, and that's why the recruiters are really amping up the recruitment thing to try to overcome the fact that people just aren't registering for the draft. So there is resistance then, people within the military, and there's resistance in the civilian community, people that are eligible to register for the draft that are not.
What I want to say, having been involved in the Connie Stay Home project myself, is that you also need to remember that there was a draft during the Vietnam War, and people fought very hard against that draft. Now that there is no draft, but you have to register for it, it's hanging over your heads. But the difference is, as Bill and others will say, is they have to do all of this PR shit to get people to join, to meet their quotas. And I think that's where the counter-recruitment groups that have been active for so long. I was a part of forming Project Llano when it started. And I think that for those of you who are younger, there is a history in San Diego of resistance. Bill mentioned the sailors that didn't go. Okay, well that was at the First Church of the Brethren, where Project Llano has its office now. They are one of the traditional peace churches. Somebody mentioned the Midway. Guess what? There was a big campaign to keep the Midway out of San Diego by peace and environmental groups. And when you were talking about the whole issue of how the military affects the harbor and the animals in the harbor and the people that eat the fish, well, guess what? Those ships were all diesel. Every aircraft carrier we now have is nuclear powered. 2 reactors on board, and that was fought very hard when they wanted to bring in the first nuclear aircraft carrier. Groups like the Environmental Health Coalition and the Peace Resource Center sued the Navy to try to stop it. Yeah, we lost, but there was a lot of work that was done to bring this out to the public. So there is a deep history here, but history is still to be made. That you're the people, we're the people, we're going to make our own history. Because I know you're all fighting this very hard. And I really commend you for coming and learning about the history, but for God's sake, go out and make your own. That's so exciting to me to see, because I'm older. Okay, I'm going to stop. I'm sorry.
I think everybody should go to Cabrillo Point sometime in their life and see all the veterans that are lying there. We saw just fields and fields of veterans who had died And whoever wants to join the military should go there before they join the military, in my opinion. I would bring my kids over there before they go to join the military. Because no war is won. I haven't seen any war being won. Do you? Have you anybody heard the Vietnam War, the Afghanistan War, the Iraq War, and now the Palestinian War? Which one is won? There's a Hamas. Hamas was in full force today when 4 of the captives were released, all shiny, 4 Israeli ladies, nice looking, fed well for 15 months. They were taken care of, honorably handed over. But when the Palestinians who were there were taken out, their faces were tortured and maimed, and no war gets won. Nobody wins in a war. So join the peace movement. It's much better.
Thank you. We're going to move on with Winter and Ash. We're going to lead this next.
Yeah, thank you everybody for sharing a little bit about your own history and kind of where you fit into this really big map that we have here. I know a lot of people mentioned, the Midway. It's like on here. You'll see just, obviously this map is not the full extent of, clearly based on what everybody said, the history of not just militarization, but demilitarization and, the resistance that's being built and has continued to be built here in San Diego, where it's normalized to be part of the war machine. Myself, I was born literally down the block from here at the Naval Hospital. And so, yeah, as you can see, we're not going to stay here for too long. I just wanted to kind of orient us into thinking about how war is really rooted in place here, which I think the films did such a great job, and everybody's stories really did a great job of really illustrating. But just before I pass the mic again to some of our compas, kasamas, this is our borderlands. This is where we're at. We're just over here. And so it's kind of color-coded. You can see the green is really just basic, direct, actual military presence. So you can see the base is here in National City, the NASCO shipyards in Barrio Logan, the Midway, like people mentioned. But we also have logistics companies who are directly participating in, actively participating in the genocide of Palestinian people as we speak. And people that I know, even in my extended family, that work in these companies and feed their children off of that money. And that's so those are all in red. And Mariam will be able to, from PYM, will be able to speak a little bit to that. Also, the purple is every school where there's JROTC presence, military presence, which David will be able to talk about a little bit. But yeah, this is where we're at, and we hope that this kind of opens the door to obviously thinking a little bit more about where war is in our backyards, but also, like some people had shared, reimagining what this would look like if none of this existed. So yeah, I'll pass this on to Ash.
Thanks, Winter. I'm going to sit down. Hopefully y'all can see me. But yeah, I just want to thank everybody for the reflections about the films. As the films have shown, as much as there's a strong military presence in our daily lives, and that genocide and violence abroad is made possible by our lives and actions here in the imperial core, there's also a rich history of resistance to militarization, war, genocide, which continues today. People, including and especially young people, are continuing to push back against American empire and settler colonialism here in San Diego, whether it's in school or in our neighborhoods. And to give some context about what resistance looks like, or resistance to the war machine looks like here and now, we thought it'd be really important to hear from David from Project Llano about their campaign against JROTC in San Diego high schools, and Mariam from Palestinian Youth Movement about their campaign to cut ties with one of the world's largest shipping and logistics companies that directly ships military cargo from places like here in our own backyard, as Winter shared, and that facilitates, the genocide against the Palestinian people. So I'm going to pass it off to you now, maybe Mariam first, and then David. And yeah, Mariam's going to share a little bit about this campaign.
Hi everyone, my name is Mariam. I'm with the Palestinian Youth Movement. So the Palestinian Youth Movement is a transnational grassroots independent movement of young Palestinians and Arab in exile, but as a result of the ongoing Zionist colonization and occupation of our homelands. Our main demands at the moment are an immediate and permanent ceasefire, the release of all Palestinian prisoners, to end all US funding to Israel, to lift the siege on Raza, and to free Palestine. So while we think about borders, colonization, we're thinking about the war, the weaponry that we're seeing, the active recruitment. I also want to highlight a few things and draw a few international connections. A lot of the weaponry used on Palestinians is actually developed in the US and then tested on Palestinians to be sent out to various other locations from there. And then it's marketed after it hits Palestine as field proven and is then more expensive to sell. So weapons sale to and from Israel is $1 billion industry. More than 70% of weapons in Israel were bought from the US. And even before the last, genocide, between 2013 and 17, more than $4.9 billion in weapons were delivered to Israel. 2 years later, in 2019, the US agreed to an annual $3.9 billion in foreign military financing, of which it spends most of it in weapons purchased from the US. In addition to this, the US has also given an extra $1.6 billion per year since 2011 to build Israel's Iron Dome. Obviously, in the past year, we saw more than twice these numbers, but it didn't start last year, right? And Israel, while accepting all of these weapons from the United States, is also the 8th biggest arms exporter in the world. In 2012, Israel earned $1,000 per capita of profit off of the weapons trade alone. In 2020, its weapons export industry produced a whopping $8.3 billion. The bulk of these exports go to Asia and the Pacific region, where Israel upholds the oppression of global communities. For instance, Israel has sold more than $740 million worth of weapons that year to Azerbaijan, aiding it in its attempt to occupy Armenia and acting as an ally to another oppressive and expansive regime. In the US, we continue to see these connections expand if we look at police officers and police academies in the US. So police officers are being trained, American police officers are being trained in counterterrorism techniques in Israel. Since 2001, over 300 high-ranking sheriffs and police from agencies large and small, from New York and Maine to Orange County and Oakland, have traveled to Israel for privately funded seminars on what is described as counterterrorism techniques. Obviously, we saw the effects of this in our own cities, specifically in Ferguson, across New York. We see this in LA, and the strategies and tactics continue to be shared today. Israeli officers, since this is Enero Zapatista, Israeli officers have also flown to Chiapas in order to train the military and police in stifling the Zapatista movement. They also passed down these, quote, anti-terrorism techniques. Israel's genocidal and settler colonial policies are borrowed heavily from the United States' own genocidal and settler colonial policies against the indigenous Americans here. This leads me to PYM's launch of its Mask Off Maersk campaign. So in the past year, or in the first few months of the genocide actually, Maersk transported over $300 million of weapons components for the top 5 weapons manufacturers to the US for assembly. For example, Maersk transports the wings of Lockheed Martin's F-35 fighter jets to the US, where these weapons are manufactured. After assembly, these weapons are sent to Israel from the US. In fact, 68% of Israel's weapons come directly from the US. The majority of these weapons are sent by the US Department of Defense, which Maersk also has links to, and specifically it's part of the Voluntary Intermodal Sea Lift Agreement, or VISA, and the Maritime Security Program, or MSP, which transports weapons on behalf of the US Department of Defense. So it's both complicit in the transport of weapons components to the US and the transport of weapons from the US to Israel, making it a critical link in the weapons supply chain. The PYM research team uncovered portions of Maersk's complicity in Israel, and we've examined that it is shipping mostly from Port Elizabeth in New Jersey and Port of Houston in Texas. While not all explicitly state that the destination country was Israel, the receiving agent is listed as the government of Israel's Ministry of Defense. So it can be assumed that they were ultimately delivered to Israel for military purposes. So logistics companies, or like why we chose Maersk as opposed to a weapons manufacturer. Logistic companies are the invisible profiteers of weapons manufacturing, making the genocide of Palestinians a reality. Targeting Maersk directly disrupts the flow of weapons in the supply chain, directly used to genocide Palestinians. And we've also achieved some major successes ever since we launched the campaign. For instance, we were able to stop the movement of Maersk weaponry from Spain to the occupation after the government of Spain barred ships loaded with military goods destined to Israel because of PYM movement around that topic. Thank you, yeah. So the government of Spain actually blocked 3 ships that were destined to go to Israel. And we are currently still ongoing in our campaign. We do not see that Maersk is currently shipping weapons from San Diego. However, since San Diego is the biggest military city in the US, there tentatively are connections here that are still to be drawn. And we invite anyone who might know information, if you would like to be an anonymous commenter, to let us know. And if you're interested in learning more, please connect to me or to our Instagram page at PYM San Diego, or find our Mask Off Maersk website for more of our reports and findings. Thank you.
Hi everyone, hi again. My name is David Morales, and I'm part of Project Llano, the project on youth and non-military opportunities. And in the next 5 minutes or so, I want to talk to you all a little bit about some of the work that Project Llano has engaged in, some of the campaigns that they have led in the past, and some of the current ongoing campaigns that we have at the moment regarding militarism, and particularly the militarization of schools and young people here in San Diego. What I want to do, however, in the next 5 minutes or so is that I want to highlight and build on what Carol was saying earlier so eloquently, that there are victories, examples of successes here in San Diego, in one of the most militarized cities, that people have been successful in combating militarism. So I want to make sure that I get this point across, and hopefully the examples that I share can illustrate this and inspire future campaigns and hope and victories. And the first thing that I want to say is that Project Llano was founded in 1984. 1984, it's one of the longest standing counter-recruitment organizations in the country that's doing this kind of work. And I want to take a moment actually to recognize some of the founders who are present here today, this night, some of the founders of Project Llano, and also some of the folks, again, who are present here, who are part of the Connie Stay Home, who have literally dedicated their lives to combating militarism in San Diego. So I want to ask them if they could stand or if they can raise their hand, and I want us to give them a round of applause, because I think we should remember and honor and acknowledge their dedication and their work. Thank you so much to you all Rick, Carol, Bill, others who have, again, committed your lives to this work and who have made this work possible for future generations. Project Llano is an organization that was founded in '84 after conscription or mandatory enlistment in the military, because the military, as it was mentioned before, decided to pivot to propaganda and to schools. Schools became key sites for recruitment. Now, not all schools and not all populations, particular populations, people of color, poor people, working class people, these became the cannon fodder for the military. And Project Llano was created to address this kind of propaganda, this kind of recruitment that was occurring in San Diego and really across the country. So the work that Project Llano does is essentially what we call counter-recruitment. We lead presentations in schools, workshops, oftentimes with the help of veterans who have now returned and have chosen to speak critically about the military so that future generations know exactly what it is that they're getting themselves into. Military recruiters, their job is to recruit. They have quotas that they have to meet. So they're not going to tell, maybe they might not lie, but they're not going to tell the entire truth to a young person that they're trying to recruit. So what Project Llano does is lead workshops, presentations, classroom presentations. We were just at a beautiful Mecha event this morning at the MAC school in Chula Vista, tabling and sharing literature information to young people. And we actually invite you, whenever you get a chance, to visit our table in the back. And if you know anybody who's considering joining the military, who has questions, we have literature. We produce research literature on different subjects regarding military enlistment. In addition to this kind of work, these kind of recruitment presentations, Project Llano also engages in grassroots activism and community organizing. We lead campaigns here locally with local school districts, and most notably San Diego Unified. And here is where I want to share just a quick anecdote, my own experience and how I became involved in Project Llano. And one of the successful victories, significant campaigns that the anti-militarism movement in San Diego, and this is not only my opinion, but I've heard some of the OGs say this as well, that San Diego has seen, right? I was a student at Mission Bay High School. I graduated high school in 2009. But when I was there, during my time there from about 2006 to 2009, JROTC, the Junior Reserve Officers Training Corps, was introduced to my school. They didn't talk too much about JROTC in the documentary Yo Soy El Army. They talked about different kinds of recruitment, the pull-up bar, the presence of recruiters. And this all happens across San Diego. San Diego Unified, the South Bay, recruiters are there all the time. They pull up with the pull-up bars, with the Humvees. I mean, you all can probably speak to, I saw almost everyone raise their hand, right, when it was asked who has seen military presence in schools. So you can imagine, and you all know the many different ways that young people are recruited in schools. But JROTC, the Junior Reserve Officer Training Corps, is one of the most effective ways for the military to recruit young people. This is an elective, supposed elective military course in schools. And this is a program that is sponsored, developed, and partially funded. Not taxpayers and school districts have to fund a lot of it, but it's partially funded by the recruitment budget of the Pentagon. And they claim that this program is not a recruitment program. They claim that this program instills leadership and civic engagement. These are some photographs that I pulled from their website. This is the cover of their San Diego Unified School District website. And I pulled these photos just the other day, right? So they claim that it's not a recruitment, that it's not about enlistment, that it's just a leadership. And we clearly see, young people handling weapons here, taking field trips to Miramar Air Show, different military bases, etc. Well, when I was in high school, JROTC was introduced to my high school, Mission Bay High School. At the time, Mission Bay High School was predominantly student of color. working class. 80% of students were bused in from Logan, Sherman, where I grew up, Southeast San Diego. And these were the students that were being recruited into JROTC without their consent, right? And I actually want to know at some point if anybody has had a similar experience or has heard of something happening when you were in high school or still happening, still ongoing, right? But my friends and I would show up to first day of class and we would see JROTC on our schedule without asking for it. And a lot of my friends were told that there was no more space in English, that there was no more space in other classes, that they had to stay in JROTC, classes that they needed to graduate or to be eligible to apply to a university. I had a friend who was placed in JROTC without her consent like 3 times. 3 times she had to ask to be removed from JROTC. But what was most shocking and what led to the successful campaign that I want to share with you all is that the JROTC program also has weapons training. They teach kids how to shoot guns in schools. Schools that oftentimes have so-called zero tolerance policies, where kids are expelled for bringing a knife, right? They teach kids how to shoot guns. And in my school, they actually knocked down the wall between 2 AVID classrooms. And for those who are not familiar what AVID is a program designed to help first-generation students get to college. They got rid of our AVID program. They knocked down the wall between the 2 AVID classrooms to build the shooting range. So they're teaching kids how to shoot guns. Up the street at La Jolla High School, which, as you all may know, is predominantly, white, affluent, they didn't even have JROTC. They didn't have recruiters. They didn't have JROTC on their campus. So we started thinking, and with the help of Project Llano, a community organization that started, leafletting, passing out flyers in front of the school, was in tune with what was happening in the district. And we started to organize. And we started the Education Not Arms Coalition, which Project Llano was a part of, and many other community organizations like the Association of Raza Educators and other organizations, longstanding organizations in San Diego. And we organized for over a year. I mean, I remember I was like a junior. And we were mobilizing to the school board meetings. We were there late, and we were organizing with parents. We managed to mobilize multiple times hundreds of students to the school board, parents, to give testimony, really, really organized. And we were successful in eliminating weapons training from all JROTC programs in San Diego Unified School District. In this local victory, in 2009, February 10, 2009, I remember the day, went on to inspire similar movements across the country, right? I always say that like the work that we do here locally has implications for other geographies as well. But this was an example of a successful victory against the big military machine here in San Diego. Eventually, we also passed a policy to recruit the amount of visits that military recruiters can make to campuses to 2 per year. Whereas before they were there every single day. Kids were being taken out of their classrooms by recruiters. And this policy that we helped draft and pass in San Diego Unified now specifically states what military recruiters can and can't do. For example, students are the ones that have to give them their information, right? They have to stand certain places, they can't go into the class. There's different regulations that this policy has. So this was an example of a successful campaign. Eventually at Mission Bay High School, last thing I'll share about this campaign is that, well, when people started paying attention and ensuring that students were not being placed without their consent, the program became so unpopular at Mission Bay that it was removed. There was no more JROTC at Mission Bay High School. So what does that say about the presence of militarism and the tactics that schools use, right, to keep JROTC going. So now I want to talk about some of the work that we're currently doing. 15 years later, 17 years later, we're still here, we're still doing this work. And in 2022, 2023, the New York Times, actually they reached out to Project Llano. We consulted them in this national expose that they did, found that students across the country, and especially in schools with higher percentage of students that were non-white and working class, again, were being involuntarily placed in JROTC, right? This is against the law, against the own Department of Defense regulation. Students should not be placed in this elective, remember I said it's a supposedly elective course, but here it is, you know, this article, this expose that found that students were being placed in JROTC without their consent. And they also had data for San Diego. So they had data for schools in San Diego, and in San Diego, something that we fought for and we thought we had accomplished 15, 16 years ago was still happening, right? So we continue to monitor this. Well, in 2023, a few years ago, we finally managed to pass a policy, clear policy that says that no student, this is San Diego Unified School District, that says no student should be placed in JROTC without first having their consent and their parents' consent, right? So that's another victory that we accomplished a few years ago. However, we know that the militarism is innovative and it's sinister and it uses all kinds of tactics and strategies. So what's going on now? Well, the consent form that the district uses, we believe, is not adequate. It doesn't fully share what the program is about, right? We think that San Diego Unified needs to adopt a consent form that clearly describes the nature of the program, that describes its military nature, the fact that students have to groom according to rigid gender standards, that they have to wear uniforms. Another thing that we've noticed is that the district enrolls students in JROTC and gives them P credit for taking JROTC, right? So it's an incentive, essentially, it's being used as an incentive for students who maybe don't want to take PE, or you know, maybe schools, we've also found that they don't have enough PE teachers, so students are just placed in JROTC and they're told, well, you need to meet your PE credit. So that's another tactic, another strategy that we're seeing. Now, I'm sharing these things in hopes that maybe some of you know people in schools, maybe siblings or cousins, that we would love to connect with you all. We want to know if this is happening. We want to know if they'd be interested or you'd be interested to help us, because this is an ongoing campaign. This is something that we're still currently organizing around and fighting. But the last thing I'll say here is that this is a graph that shows the traditional high schools in San Diego, right? It doesn't include typical or charter schools, but you have like all the major, you know, high schools here. And we see that the schools that have the highest percentage of non-white students, that is students of color, also have the highest percentage of students enrolled in JROTC. This is data that we just compiled because of this campaign. You know, we're analyzing data, but this is still happening. I mean, it's not a surprise, right? We're talking about the recruitment of people of color, Latinos, and not just Latinos, other groups now, but this is a very clear picture of what we're facing. Project Llano, again, is continuing to organize against this. If anybody is interested in participating or has an anecdote or knows someone that was placed in JROTC without their consent, we would love to talk to you, because we're in the midst of it. We're in the middle of it, and we're getting ready to. We've been talking to board members. We've been thinking about other tactics and strategies to ensure that students are not placed in JROTC without their consent, that they're not preyed on by predatory military recruiters, because we believe that young people should have the right to make their own choice, to be fully informed of what it entails if they do decide to join the military, but they should have all the information, right, so that they can make their own mind, their own decision. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, David and Mariam, for all the information that y'all both shared about your work. There's probably many questions that y'all have, just reflections that you want to share, but just for the sake of time, because we do have one last activity, we will maybe leave that for at the end, and also after the event, you can talk with both of them about their work. But just grateful to be able to speak to the current campaigns that organizations here in our San Diego, Tijuana borderlands are doing right here and now. We did want to shift to a little bit of a counter mapping activity. So Winter already shared this map for you all. And as Winter shared, these are just some of many examples of various sites in which we witness militarization here in San Diego. And so now that we've reflected on some of these sites of violence, we've also already talked about in the beginning how we all fit in. And now we've been plugged into current youth-led campaigns to fight back against militarization, locally and overseas. We thought it would be a helpful exercise to think all together what we would put in place of these sites of violence and remap this map through what we're calling a counter map. So in this exercise, Ashley is walking around right now and giving people sticky notes. We'll have 2 sets of questions, and in these blank space, aka the ocean, you'll put your stickies of your responses to these questions. So the first question that we have for folks is, if we could get rid of JROTC courses in Lincoln High School, for example, what kind of classes could we have in its place? And people can, feel free. There should be markers that are also being passed around. And then you are more than welcome to, walk up here and place your stickies in this blank space on the left-hand side. Anyone have questions about the activity? So the question is, if we could get rid of JROTC courses in Lincoln High School, what kind of classes could we have in its place? We have some people saying public service courses, LATAM history, marine protected area, financial literacy, U.S. intervention histories / resistance histories, maybe an environmental regeneration class, a gardening class, a crochet, sewing, a poetry class, a playwriting class, an outdoors hiking or climbing classes. Y'all have so many visions. I love this so much. What else do we have? Bring just back wood shop, AVID classes, food sovereignty, San Diego ecology, artivism, Kumeyaay language courses. We also see community gardens, nutritional health, cooking, demilitarized globalism. Again, more history of indigenous peoples here. I see again Kumeyaay language classes, culture and stories.
But real quick, if you still have a sticky and still have a pen, we wanted to know, beyond just JROTC, but thinking about what Mariam had said, if all of this didn't exist, the logistics companies, what could be put in its place? What could we use these resources in the war economy and all these logistics companies for?
Not only classes in schools, but also what could we put? Anyone else have reflections? Yeah. Trees that actually have fruit. Yep. Land back. Absolutely. Refugee centers. Schools, more schools. Any other reflections? Community land trusts. Community gardens. What else will we put in their place? Housing projects. What? Parks.
Hey y'all, we're still out here. Thank you for sticking around and for doing this mapping activity. I think if we just want to open the floor, even for just like another 5 minutes, just pass the mic around, float it around, and just sit with the the intergenerational organizing that we kind of touched on throughout the night. If anybody has thoughts about, how young people have resisted and continue to resist militarization in San Diego, and how, we're here together today, how are local people building counterpower against the military?
So we heard not only from like folks who are doing the work now, currently young folks, but we also heard from older folks who've been doing this work. And so we thought this question would be really valuable for us to think about. And so curious, does anyone have thoughts? Why is intergenerational organizing critical to fighting back against militarism? Yeah.
Yeah, I really appreciated being able to see feels like the courage that folks had putting mics and putting cameras in front of people who were clearly very upset, but also I felt like their solidness, their dignity. I could feel that there wasn't an aggression coming from the interviewers. And I think in our generation and sometimes in a lot of the stories that are told, the misinformation we receive in school, there's this idea that all activism is violent. And I felt like, oh my gosh, these people are really having a real conversation with such calm. That was super inspiring. So I'm like, oh, maybe we can go to the bases. Maybe it'll be okay.
Thank you so much.
Maybe it's not directly related to the question, but I want to talk about how STEM programs are funded by the Department of Defense. Like 2 days ago, I saw my cousin building something, and I was just like, oh, what are you building? And he was building like a little thing he got from school. It was like a tank. And then my other brother was building like a missile launcher or something. And I was like, what the hell? And then the box, it said like STEM or something, STEM programs. So a lot of programs are funded by the Department of Defense, and a lot of times they'll go into neighborhoods creating these events for youth to kind of learn about like building stuff, and we think that they're doing computery stuff and they're just building weapons, and again normalizing the military presence. So maybe like aiming towards organizing like more for arts, less STEM. And I understand the importance of sciences, but when we have a specific area of sciences being pushed towards our youth, I think it's really dangerous, especially the era of technology and what they're being shown on the internet, video games. I think that's something that we need to pay attention to, and maybe that's like our next topic as far as intergenerational organizing.
Okay, so my friend had the idea to create a zine that says exactly where your money goes to, and I think that that's a tactic that works very well for some people who might say, oh, I don't care because this is not affecting me, because at the end of the day everything affects you. So I think if we can create, or like even like this, like passing that to people, they're gonna be like, oh shit, like this is right here, and I think that's really important. But I think we need to bring back like going to places and passing out stuff, and it's important to know where you're going. Also, like if you're going to the Spring Valley swap meet, that's like a certain group of people. If you're going to somewhere else, it's like a certain group of people. But yeah.
Yeah, I had something to say. I think also like going back to someone earlier asked a question about like, oh, I work with youth and like, they have aspirations of joining the military even at a very young age. Like, I think a lot of what we can do as like older folks for these youth is like, being curious about why they think that way. Like I think like even like very like young folks in like elementary school, like, like you can ask them why they feel like that's like, something they aspire to do with their lives. Like maybe a lot of it is like, oh, like I want to like protect the people I love, or like because like I care about my community. but it's like, you know, you can show them that there's other options in doing that in like a respectful way. And I think also someone that like does work with youth or like has worked with youth in the past as like a teacher or like a counselor in some ways, like a lot of times like, you know, kids just don't have people that are like curious about like what they are actually interested in or like the things that they genuinely care about. And like in school systems, as we all know, like we're just like expected to continue doing what is like the mode of production or like someone talking at you all day. But in reality, like, yeah, like youth actually have a lot of passion. It's just like, how do we find the ways to like channel that for them or like inspire them? And so I feel like intergenerationally, like as I guess like people becoming elders, even though like some of us are youth here, like, yeah, it's important to like be curious, not just about like youth, but even like the perspectives of like what elders have done in the past, or maybe even like why they think the ways they do, even if maybe like we don't necessarily like are united on like the same things. I think like curiosity is really important, even when like it doesn't align with like your own values. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
I think intergenerational organizing is critical because it's a shared history at the end of the day. So without an understanding of history and being able to contextualize some of the many problems that we're seeing today, we won't understand how to address or at least have a better understanding of how to address by looking at the failures of the past and being able to learn from that and move forward with better ways, easier ways of getting people to organize. And yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Intergenerational organizing feels critical because of learning about the wins. And so that's really nice. I think it's really heartbreaking though to see like in that first movie how like Constance still went to Vietnam. And it's really frustrating and like low-key I feel just like a straight up nihilist sometimes. I'm just like nothing's ever gonna change. And I think especially as we've seen like no matter the amount of protests, no matter the thousands of people that are in the streets protesting for Palestine, like nothing ever fucking changes. And like, you know, it's not a permanent ceasefire, and it seems like so much is like still gonna happen in terms of harm and genocide before anything actually changes. And I think intergenerational is important because they bring with them the history of like the small wins. But I think, at least me as like an organizer in my community, I still just feel really heartbroken and disappointed and like feeling like nothing's ever gonna change. Sorry to be a downer.
It reminded me of how last summer in June, there was over 1,000 people who actually mobilized to a summit and then like a big march downtown to protest against the Rim of the Pacific exercises, which happen every 2 years here in San Diego. And they're actually the world's largest maritime military exercises. And I think this year, 29 different militaries allied with the US came to San Diego. And they're hosted by our very own like Third Fleet. And that includes militaries like the IDF. It also includes militaries like the Armed Forces of the Philippines who commit war crimes against people in the Philippines too. But then also like the Mexican military, and like I know a lot of us are Latino, and we know that like the Mexican military also treats the people of Mexico very badly. And so all of these like allied militaries come together. San Diego hosts them, and then they go out to Hawaii to like indigenous water and land, and they play war games and like practice military exercises. And it's really, really bad for the environment. The violence against women in Hawaii is really bad. And also like here when they come to San Diego. But yeah, I just wanted to say the anti-war movement is still alive here in San Diego. And yeah, I remember feeling that like sense of pride last summer when we saw 1,000 people in the streets mobilizing against RIMPAC. So let's come back in 2 years. And before that, let's find out all of the dirty things the military is doing right here in San Diego and continue to mobilize against them.
I was thinking about the
intergenerational aspect of all of the communities that we have in San Diego that have really started because of the refugee communities. So like we have Convoy, Mira Mesa, all those areas, Linda Vista. A lot of people moved there from families that came who as refugees, specifically like in Vietnam, but we also has East African conflicts too. And so I feel like a lot of those communities maybe should be on that map as well. A lot of those people, again, like refugees, they did not choose to be here, but they had to go somewhere. So, and they landed in San Diego before going to other places. So I think that should be added. And then the other thing I wanted to mention, hold on, now I've forgotten you guys. Oh no. Oh no. Okay, it's gone. That was it. Okay, someone else for now.
So I would like to thank you all for coming and sharing this moment, this very intimate moment, talking about the things that aren't talked about. You know, the military works in very covert ways. You know, it's evolved to become embedded into our schools. It's transformed into military contractors, hiring regular people in ways that we're not always familiar with. And so talking about these things amongst each other like is a dream come true in a lot of ways, you know, to state it plainly. And I would like to thank all of the organizations that are here present, sharing their work, sharing their successes. Project Llano.
I'm so sorry to interrupt. I did remember. Okay. The thing I was thinking about was, this goes to somewhat intergenerational, but more about the schools. So our high schools, we don't get government until senior year. And so a lot of the students, by the time they're making these lifelong decisions, like going into the military, they don't understand the power structures of government, nor do they understand the branches of government and the rankings of government and who does what and all of that sort of stuff. Just the general organization of how it all works, how the government works, local, state, city, whatever. And without that, they don't know anything. They just go into the ether of whatever military is. And so they go by the words of these people who come in, right? So I think that moving that government or some aspect of education of just how government works and how it influences people's lives, doesn't have to be history class, just structure, that would make, I think, a huge difference in how they perceive all of this.
You all are welcome to continue adding sticky notes, additional thoughts that you have to the counter map. What we would like to ask you to do after we're done here is to help us clean up by moving these chairs back into the back room here. But before that, again, I just want to thank Project Llano, sharing their successes over many years, continuing this work over decades, Palestinian youth movement for their perseverance, you know, to be in community with PYM is incredible. Homegrown Youth Collaborative, amazing work, coming up with these activities for us and really trying to imagine what does it mean to come together, think together, and converse together. And for the folks that were a part of the Constellation campaign, who are here, still present, who are still in Project Llano, still coming to hear from us and sharing their thoughts, you know. It's an incredible moment to be here, so thank you all. And also, there will be additional events that are part of Enero Zapatista and for the rest of the month and even the beginning of February. Enero Zapatista, the committee is selling their own shirts, actually. They're in the back towards La Tiendita, right here to the back. And feel free, there's still more food, I believe. And if you all can help us clean up the chairs, and again, thank you all for coming.